7 Sinister Vacation Horrors, revealed true stories from haunted destinations abroad. Sarah could feel the weight of the eerie village pressing down on her chest as twilight cast deep shadows through the cobbled streets. With every step, she could almost hear whispers brushing against her ear, shrouded promises of darkness mixed with the gentle rustle of leaves. Here, in this quaint Italian village, a story unraveling beneath the surface promised more than just picturesque scenes. It shimmered with the promise of horrors that would stalk her family until the very end. Beware the whispering woods. They watch children. The warning echoed in her mind, and chills crept down her spine. It had been just a harmless vacation, a chance to escape the heavy atmosphere of her life as a newly single mother. But now, as Jake clutched Lily's trembling hand, their childlike innocence seemed to amplify the terror that lurked just beyond visibility, growing thicker by the hour. "Mom, there's something out there," Jake exclaimed, eyes wide, eyes darting toward the ink-black edges of the forest, countless whispers floating through the damp night air. Sarah forced a reassuring smile, but the dread coiling within her was suffocating. She closed her eyes tightly, shoving her phone deep into her pocket, willing herself to shake off the unease. They were here to make memories, to gather moments, a carnival of joy after all the pain. As darkness descended like a cloak, an unsettling silence enveloped them. The wind howled through the trees, chilling Sarah to the bone, while her surroundings appeared to close in on them like a trap. It was then that she heard a low rustling sound cracking through the quiet, drawing her attention toward the line of trees bordering their rental home. Fear froze her heart as she imagined what might be lying just out of sight. With a fleeting glance back to her children, their scared faces sent a jolt of panic through her veins. "Mom, it's watching us," Jake pressed in panic, pointing desperately towards an unseen figure. Sarah's mind raced. Just shadows playing tricks, that's all she needed to convince herself, if only it were so. "Everything's fine, kids. Just tall grass," she whispered, but the shaky tremor in her voice belied her comforting words. As dawn broke, she ventured into the village center, determination fueling her steps, yet whispers of folklore filled the air, painting nightmarish tales with every chatty local she encountered. To her horror, she learned of the abandoned church where dark rituals had supposedly taken place and of children that had vanished, some never to return. Her stomach twisted. Fear was no longer just a figment of imagination, it was rooted in something tangible and terrifying. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Suddenly, dark clouds formed above as a fierce storm erupted, trapping them inside their rental. Rain hammered against the roof like a frantic heartbeat, a warning. Communication cut off, leaving them isolated just as shadows crawled dangerously close to their window, lurking with the threat of something ancient lurking in the storm. Heart racing, fingers trembling, Sarah clutched her children close. The townsfolk's benign smiles masked something sinister, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As midnight struck, the church bell's echo seemed to ring not merely time but danger, a warning that their presence had awakened an ancient evil. Something was stirring, and whatever it was hungry. Could she save them from becoming just another part of this village's haunting legacy? Sarah took a breath as the shadows grew closer, the weight of desperation thickening the air. What horrors awaited as the nightmare began to unfold? The air was thick with tension, a heaviness that clung to Sarah's skin like fog as she fought against panic. Rain rattled against the windows in a relentless frenzy, drowned out the frightened whispers of her children. Somewhere in the distance, the ancient bell tolled again, each sound striking her heart like a hammer, a reminder of their isolation. Fear pressed ever tighter, squeezing out her breath. "Let's check the doors," she said, attempting to sound calmer than she felt, desperate to shield her children from the terror creeping into their home. As she moved to the front door, she paused. Shadows flitted beyond the frosted glass, dark shapes that twisted unnaturally as though alive. "Mom!" Lily's soft voice trembled, pulling her attention back. "I think there's someone outside." "No one is out there," Sarah replied, but her voice betrayed her. She turned the lock with shaking hands, peeking through the tiny window to find nothing. Just trees swaying wildly, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. They were not safe. Not at all. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the house, making them all jump. Sarah's heart thundered in her ears as she glanced at Jake. His face paled, the reality of their situation gnawing at his small frame. The wind howled again, and in that moment, a scream, the raw sound of terror, pierced through the night. It felt so close, clawing at the edges of her sanity. "Stay here," she hissed, rushing toward the sound. Mustering every ounce of bravery, she grabbed a heavy kitchen knife, its cold steel biting into her palm like a warning. The hallway stretched before her like a tunnel leading into darkness, the kind of void from which dread spills. Another thud rattled the house, louder this time, right outside the kitchen. Every instinct screamed for her to retreat, but she forced herself forward, creeping across the kitchen tile, the knife trembling in her grip. A flash of lightning illuminated the room just as she reached the door. The sight of darker shadows clawing at the edges of the yard sent her recoiling, heart plummeting. This was no natural storm. With a decisive breath, she flung the door open, gasping at the way the wind howled and surged, pulling at her clothes. The rain blinded her, stinging her face like nails. But there, just at the edge of the yard, stood a figure cloaked in darkness, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Its presence hummed with menace, leaning slightly as it regarded her. "Mom!" Jake's cry shot through the air, pulling her focus back to the safety of her children. "Get inside. Lock the door," she shouted, but the words felt etched in stone, heavy with urgency. The figure remained silent, unmoving, a stark silhouette drenched in shadow. Panic surged, flooding her veins. What was it waiting for? Why felt the shadows so alive? With straining muscles, she slammed the door shut, anticipating a crash or a scream, but only a low, menacing laugh echoed through the darkness outside. Her heart sank. "Mom, who was that?" Jake whispered, fear pooling in his eyes. "I don't know, baby," she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. The kitchen felt smaller now, the distance collapsing between them and some unspeakable evil outside. They huddled together, pressing close as the house remained steeped in silence. But then, to their horror, soft tapping began on the windows, slow and deliberate, as if whatever haunted them was savoring their fear. Sarah's hand trembled, the knife felt heavy. This wasn't just a vacation nightmare, it was a prelude to something darker. The storm lashed harder, and amidst the chaos, a shadow broke free from its confines. "What do they want?" she asked the empty air, desperation creeping into her voice. But the only response was the chilling laughter wrapping itself around her. What did they want? Was it too late for her family? The whispers grew, sharper, more insistent voices from the edge of sanity. Whatever hunted them was not finished. As the children clung to her, she felt the grip of dread tighten. The wind shifted outside, and the darkness thickened, pressing in as something stirred. They weren't alone. Sarah looked to her children, their eyes wide, filled with unanswered questions. "Mom!" Lily's voice broke, "What is happening?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her heart racing. "But we need to find a way out now." The rush to escape echoed in the silence, but in that dark, vast expanse hung the unshakable question of who would answer. Could they outrun the shadows, or were they already too late? In the eerie stillness, Sarah's heart raced louder than the storm outside. The tapping on the windows escalated, a staccato rhythm that sent chills racing down her spine. She cast a glance at her children, their terrified faces reflecting the flickering light of the dying kitchen bulb. "Maybe it's just the branches," Jake suggested weakly, attempting to anchor himself in some semblance of logic, but his eyes betrayed him. They glimmered with fear, widening with each desperate tap. "Stay close," Sarah commanded, grabbing Jake's hand and pulling Lily near her side. The kids nodded, pressing against her as if they formed a barricade against the dark. "Mom, what if it gets in?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling like the leaves in the storm. "It won't," Sarah lied, her mind racing. Behind the strength of her voice, doubt gnawed at her. She squeezed the knife tighter, its cold surface grounding her in the growing panic. Just then, another loud thud reverberated from the back of the house, followed by a crash that sounded like glass shattering. The kids gasped, instinctively ducking closer to her. Sarah felt the air chill further, a sense of predatory weight settling in the corners of the room. "Maybe we should call someone," Jake said, already lifting his phone. His hands shook as he tried to get a signal. Each failed attempt chipped away at their dwindling hope, the phone flashing no service with a mocking vibrance. "No, don't do that. We can't let them know we're inside." The words spilled out with urgency, but a voice in her head scolded her for suggesting fear over safety. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting and contorting in grotesque shapes. Sarah's stomach sank. What were they? "Mom, look!" Lily gasped, pointing to the kitchen window, where the figure stood just outside, cloaked in darkness. The rain formed an impression against the glass, contrasting the outline as if highlighting the malevolent presence trying to breach their sanctuary. "Get down!" Sarah shouted, pushing them both to the floor. A roar of wind echoed outside, carrying the whispers into the room. The words spiraled around, incomprehensible yet pulsing with malice. "Please, Mom." Jake whimpered, tears pooling in his eyes. "I'm scared." "Me too, sweetie, me too," she murmured, her resolve wilting under the weight of his fear. The predatory laughter outside morphed into an unsettling chant, as if the storm itself was mocking her helplessness. Sarah needed to act. They had to escape. "Listen," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. "I'll go check the back. You stay here. Lock the door." "Mom, no." Jake squeaked, his grip tightening on her shirt. "Trust me. I'll be right back." She didn't believe it anymore, but she needed them to cling to hope. Barefoot, she navigated through the darkened hallway, the kitchen knife a feeble comfort. Each creak of the floorboards mirrored the rapid thudding of her heart. The memories of laughter and sunlight seemed a world away. She reached the back door, heart racing. Peeking through the small cracked window, the yard spun into chaos. The trees twisted as if caught in a dance of despair. But there was no sign of the figure anymore, only a stifling sense of dread that wrapped around her like a vice. "Please don't open it," came a shaky voice from behind her. Startled, Sarah turned to find Jake standing there, eyes wide with fear. "We have to go." Now as she took a step toward him, an overpowering sound erupted from outside, a voice, hollow and deep, echoing from the distance. "You cannot hide." The words slithered through her, sending a jolt of cold terror racing up her spine. Without thinking, she spun around and turned the knob, the door groaning ominously as it creaked open, beyond her will. "Mom!" Jake screamed just as a powerful gust of wind forced its way through the opening, filling the room with a whirlwind of darkness. The shadows bunched together, crawling inside, hungry and alive. "Hold on!" she shouted, grabbing both her children as the grip of despair swooped still closer, wrapping tightly around their throats as the storm raged on. Then came silence. Eyes wide, hearts throbbing, they stared at the void before them, waiting for the next onslaught. Would they have the strength to face what lurked in the dark? As the shadows seemed to pulse hungrily towards them, Sarah knew the battle for survival was only just beginning. What fresh horrors awaited them as they fought against the encroaching night? The silence that followed was unsettling. Sarah held her breath, straining to catch any faint sound over the thrumming of her heart. She could feel Lily quivering against her leg, and Jake was still pressed close, the muted light from the window casting a ghostly pallor over his frightened features. Was the storm still raging outside, or had it been swallowed by an unseen chaos, time twisted in on itself, stretching seconds into eternities? Then, a low scrape echoed outside, like nails against wood. It came from the side of the house. The dread within her twitched awake, crawling into the crevices of her mind. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if saying too much could shatter whatever fragile peace remained. Jake nodded, but his eyes darted to the back door where shadows danced in the dim light. Sarah tightened her grip on the knife, the cold metal reassuring against her clammy palm. The scraping continued, a desperate clawing that gnawed at her resolve. "Do you think it's gone?" Lily's voice was a mere ghost of its usual brightness, a desperate question hanging in the abyss of uncertainty. Before Sarah could answer, the glass in the kitchen window shattered, a violent explosion of fragments showered over them. Startled, they flinched, instinctively huddling together in a tight circle. The wind curled in, gusting through the gaping hole, shrieking like a banshee. "Run!" Sarah screamed, and adrenaline surged through her as she grabbed each child by the arm. Feeling their small bones shake, they sprinted down the hallway, each footfall echoing like a drum against the walls, the shadows slinking after them. With every glance back, the darkness seemed to swell closer, eager to consume them piece by piece. Frantic, they reached the front door, but it was locked tight as a coffin. "It won't budge," Jake shouted, panic crackling in his voice. "Then we find another way," Sarah said, eyes darting around for an escape. She spotted the small window above the kitchen sink, just out of reach but their only chance. "We can climb up." "Mom!" Lily cried, terror gripping her throat. "Please, we have to try." The children scrambled up onto the counter, climbing as high as they could manage. Sarah followed, using every ounce of strength to boost them higher. But before they could reach for the window, the air shifted, a ripple of darkness slipped through the doorway, slithering into the room like smoke. "Don't look at it!" Sarah yelled, pressing her body against the kids, shielding them as splotches of shadow writhed in and out of focus, but the darkness spoke. It carried whispers, half-formed words that clawed at her mind. "Join us." The children recoiled, their fingers frozen on the window's ledge. "Mom, what does it want?" Jake's quivering voice barely made it past his lips. "I don't know." She felt her pulse quicken, tightening into a frantic rhythm. "Just hold on." The shadows surged forward, hungry for their light, for their warmth, always inching closer. "No!" Sarah screamed, frustration igniting. "I want to let it take you." With a surge of desperate energy, she threw the knife, a wild arc of silver through the air, embedding itself in the wall far ahead. The darkness recoiled, a hiss, a seething retreat, pulling back momentarily. "Climb, now!" she urged, granting them the moment they needed. They scrambled up, the window looming closer. Just as Lily pushed through, a wave of chilling cold swept over Sarah. The weight of numerous eyes pressed against her dark, intentionless voids. "Mom!" Jake cried, eyes darting to the shadows. "Hurry! I'm coming!" she shouted, forcing herself through the window, adrenaline blurring her fear. But as she turned to pull Jake out, the darkness lunged forward like an avalanche, an all-consuming tide that rolled toward them with an insatiable hunger. In that moment, Sarah realized they were not just fighting for their lives. They were facing something ancient, something that knew them perhaps better than they knew themselves. With one last desperate grip, she yelled, "Go!" As she felt the shadows tearing at her, ripping into her essence, then darkness engulfed her. What terror awaited her children on the other side of the window, now exposed to the unforgiving world of darkness beyond? The night was suffocating, the air thick with the echo of Sarah's last scream. Jake's heart raced, pounding hard against his ribs as he scrambled through the window. Fear clawed at him, tightening like a noose around his throat. He turned, witnessing the nightmare unfolding inside the writhing shadows, tendrils reaching for the place where his mother had just stood. "Mom!" he cried, but the word felt powerless, swallowed by the wind howling outside. Lily landed next to him, breathless and wide-eyed. "Where's Mom?" The question hung in the air, a palpable dread that seeped into Jake's bones. He glanced back through the shattered window and felt a shiver as he met the abyss where she had vanished. I don't know. She's coming. She has to be. But as seconds stretched into eternity, desperation filled the silence. With nowhere to go, panic spiked in Jake. He turned, pulling Lily's small hand tightly in his. We need to run. The two children darted away from the back of the house, past the swirl of chaos they had narrowly escaped. The darkness still lingered near the shattered window, low whispers clawing at their minds, promising safety and comfort. But they couldn't trust that. Not anymore. Where do we go? Lily asked, her voice trembling. They were in unfamiliar territory, the wild landscape stretching before them like a dark ocean, filled with unseen dangers. Just away from here. Jake shouted, though he was unsure where away even was. They plunged into the trees bordering the property, branches snagging their clothing and scraping their skin. Yet, they pressed on, heartbeats thunderous in their ears, breaths rapid and shallow. The shadows trailed behind them, slinking like ghosts through the underbrush, whispering secrets that made Jake's skin crawl. Join us floated softly on the bitter breeze. Each word felt like ice against his skin, promising an end to their flight, but at what cost? Keep going, don't listen. He urged, turning them sharply to the right, deeper into the woods. But each step felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was trying to restrain them, sinking its claws into their ankles. The forest was alive with sounds that turned into frantic symbols of dread. Twigs snapping. Leaves rustling. A soft, slithering noise creeping like something sentient, stalking them from the shadows. Jake! Lily gasped. He could see terror etched on her tiny face, illuminated by the moonlight. I want Mom. I know, me too. He shouted back, anger forging strength. But we can't stop. We have to find a way back to her. They pressed on, but fatigue tugged at their limbs. With every hurried step, the darkness seemed to swell, pushing in from the edges, taunting. The whispers grew louder, insisting they rest, that it would be okay, but Jake's resolve hardened. They were not going to give in. Suddenly, a clearing opened before them, moonlight spilling out, stark and inviting. But as they stepped forward, Jake's stomach twisted. At the center stood a decrepit old cabin, its windows shattered, door hanging limply from a single hinge. A flicker of hope ignited in his chest. Maybe there's something in there. We can hide until Mom comes. But as they approached, a cold breeze howled from within, and the shadows coiled tighter around them, writhing with life, pulling at the edges of their sanity. Lily hesitated, glancing back toward the encroaching darkness. Do you think it's safe? Jake swallowed, fear bubbling in his throat. It has to be. It's our only shot. Trust me. Just then, a bone-chilling wail erupted from the cabin, a spectral cry that sent both children reeling backward. Stay back! Jake shouted, instinct driving him forward as a dark figure emerged from the shadows of the cabin, its featureless face bearing down on them, emanating despair that he could feel it now, the weight of the shadows bearing into him, a grave truth clawing at his consciousness. This place was not just haunted. It was alive and it hungered. Run! He yelled, shoving Lily ahead of him as the figure stepped closer, the wailing drowning out their screams. As they fled into the darkness, Jake realized the true horror was just beginning, and it might already be too late for Sarah. What awaited them deeper in the woods? Would they run until they collapsed, or would this place consume them whole? Jake's legs propelled him forward, his instincts driving him deeper into the night. He and Lily sprinted past gnarled roots and low-hanging branches that snagged at their clothes, tearing fabric and skin alike. The darkness felt alive, breathing heavily around them, a predator hungrily tracking its prey. He urged Lily on, her small hand slipping several times from his grasp, but he couldn't afford to slow down. The figure inside the cabin had been unsettling enough, but it was the wail that echoed in his mind, sharp and piercing. It was a cry of pure anguish, a sound that threatened to swallow them whole. Keep going, keep going. He panted, his voice a mixture of fear and admonishment. But with every step, the forest seemed to constrict around them, making it harder to breathe. An unseen weight pressed down on him, robbing him of energy with each stride. Jake Lily's voice trembled, a ghostly whisper barely audible through the howling wind. I can't keep just a little farther. Jake snapped, the urgency of their escape fueling his panic. He didn't dare look back, fearing what he might see. Then came the rush. The whispering, the low hissing sounds danced closer, weaving through the trees, wrapping around them like a fetid mist. Join us, join us. They taunted, seductive and beckoning. The shadows flickered at the edge of his vision, dancing in mockery, a sinister ballet urging Lily to stop, to surrender. No. He shouted into the void, shaking off the despair wrapping around him like a thick cord. Not you. Don't listen. But Lily's breath hitched, her pace faltering as she paused, her gaze fixed somewhere in the black depths of the forest. Jake, I can hear them. Frustration boiled over. He turned sharply, grasping her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. They're trying to trick you. Remember what Mom said. We have to stick together. Her expression wavered, a flicker of doubt creeping into her features. In that heartbeat, he could see her resolve cracking. His heart dropped. If they separated now. Please, Lily. We need each other. Just then, a piercing scream echoed around them, a horrid sound that reverberated through the trees and clawed at the air. This time, it wasn't the chilling wail from the cabin, but something far more ghastly. It was human, raw, and filled with agony. A chill spread across Jake's skin like ice water, as he felt a profound sense of loss wash over him. Mom, Lily whispered, fear and longing threading through her voice. Jake's stomach twisted painfully. They couldn't lose her too. We need to find her. He urged, despair cutting through his tone. Without thinking, he gripped Lily's hand tighter and took off again. They pushed through the oppressive trees, branches scratching at their faces as they stumbled deeper into the woods. Sweat dripped down Jake's brow, stinging his eyes, blurring his vision. Just ahead, the trees thinned out, revealing another small clearing. A flicker of hope sent adrenaline coursing in his veins. This way. As they broke free of the trees, Jake stopped short. His heart sank as he took in a sight worse than his nightmares. The clearing led directly to an old stone well, crumbling and overgrown with weeds. Its mouth yawned wide and dark, an inviting abyss. Flickers of movement danced just beyond the edges of the well, shapes that seemed to shift and pulsate. No, he breathed, dread coiling in his stomach. Jake. Lily's voice cracked, her grip slackening as she stumbled closer, drawn toward the well's edge. Stay away from it. He shouted, rushing to her side, pulling her back just as a cold draft blew from the inside, sending shivers up their spines. He could almost hear the whispers again, promising secrets and safety, but a dark voice rang clear in his head. Mothers were not coming back for lost children. Jake's pulse quickened. We have to go. Now. With a primal urge, they turned to flee, terror pushing them. But the ground shook suddenly, and from the well erupted a ghastly wail, the sound of lost souls, twisted and suffering. He pulled Lily forcibly again, their feet barely finding grip as they fought against the onslaught of shadowy figures erupting from the well, wailing and reaching for them. No. Not again. Jake's heart raced, the air thick with a malevolent fury as he and Lily screamed, the darkness closing in. What was this place becoming? And would they ever truly escape its grasp? The darkness roared around them, eager to swallow every desperate breath they drew. Jake stumbled, dragging Lily with him, their feet slipping on damp earth, their hearts pounding in sync with the chaos surrounding them. The wailing swelled, clawing at their senses, a haunting melody that tore at the very fabric of their courage. Keep moving. Jake shouted, but his voice felt lost beneath the cacophony of cries. Somehow, the shapes from the well had multiplied, swirling like a storm, an endless tide of despair rushing toward them, greedy and relentless. He could feel Lily's hand weaken in his, trembling with fear. I can't, her words were stretched thin, like the last remnants of a dream fading into morning light. No. Don't you dare give in. He could barely recognize himself, fierce and frantic, pushing against the tide of screams and shadows that fought to pull them apart. We have to stick together. But the shadows shifted, weaving through the trees, their silhouettes contorting grotesquely. They whispered promises of safety and reunion. Join us, the words wrapped around his mind, cocooning it in doubt. Were they vision or mirage? He forced himself to focus, dragging Lily behind him, slipping further away from the edge of haunting echoes. Jake, her voice quivered. What if Mom? He clenched his teeth, heat rising like flames through his veins. No. We can't think like that. We'll find her. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them, and a chilling cold swept through the air. They were no longer just being pursued, the forest itself seemed alive with shadowy hands reaching out from the darkness. Taking a chance, Jake turned to glance back, only to see an ethereal figure hovering at the well's edge. It flickered in and out of view, its expression an agonized mask that made his heart lurch. Jake! Look out! Lily screamed, pulling him away just as a gnarled hand shot out, narrowly missing his shoulder. The shadows began moving faster, feeding off the fear that radiated from both of them. They pressed forward, blind panic guiding their steps. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if the forest wanted to devour them whole. Jake strained against the sensation, pouring every ounce of strength into running while Lily stumbled slightly. Don't stop. He gasped, raspy breaths tearing through the murky air. Each footfall felt slower, weighed down by unseen dread. Just a bit further. They burst back into dense trees bordering another clearing, lungs screaming for air. This one was different. Instead of solace, figures moved around a flickering fire that crackled ominously in the center. Their eyes reflected the flame with a twisted hunger, a hunger mixed with a knowing smile that chilled Jake to the core. They were waiting, watching, prepared for what he and Lily had only started to comprehend. Jake felt Lily squeeze his hand as she peered past him, her eyes glued to the flickering shadows. Are they? She began, but the tremor in her voice cut off the question. Jake felt it too, the forest echoed dreadfully with a hollow laughter. He stepped forward, instinctually protecting her, but every cautious move felt wrong. His mind raced, searching for anything that made sense in this arrangement of twisted faces staring eagerly at them. Their features shifted like shadows in the firelight, eerily familiar yet corrupted by something wicked. Stay close. Jake took a breath, forcing his mind to fight against the growing fear. But what was waiting for them in those firelit eyes? Just as they turned to retreat, a voice split the air, low, smooth, almost seductive. You can find her, Jake. All you have to do is listen, join us, and we will show you the way. He hesitated, heart pounding in his chest. What path could this even lead them down? Would they ever escape the darkness that had gripped their fates? Lily, we have to run. He felt the pull again, shadows tangling around their ankles, trying to bind them to this unholy ground. But before they could take a single step, the figures lunged toward them, their intentions clearer than ever. Binding them to this nightmare. The night surged forth, pulling them away from the last remnants of hope. What would Jake sacrifice? And would they finally find an escape or fall deeper into the mouth of darkness? The figures converged, a mass of wretched intent, their arms reaching out like twisted branches. Jake felt Lily's hand break free from his grip, panic swelling within him. Lily! He shouted, his voice piercing through the suffocating fear. He turned just in time to see her being dragged backward by the nightmarish shapes, their laughter echoing in cruel delight. She fought, flailing against the hands that clawed at her, but it was like trying to escape a thunderstorm grasping at her ankles. Help me! Her scream shattered the air, a desperate plea that raked against Jake's heart. He could feel the heaviness of the shadows closing in on him, the air electric with dark energy. No! He barked, lunging forward. Adrenaline surged, and he plunged into the swarm of figures, feeling the chill of their cold breaths wash over him. They hissed, cold whispers wrapping around him like chains. With every step, the firelight flickered, illuminating faces that twisted in and out of recognition. They looked like lost souls, carted from some forgotten nightmare, their eyes filled with an unnatural hunger. Memories surged within him, friends, family all faced with a similar fate. He couldn't let them take Lily. With a fierce cry, he shoved through the throng. His hands found the grip of a bony wrist, yanking it away from Lily. But as he pulled, shadows enveloped him, swelling and crashing like waves. "Join us," they chanted, their voices woven in a dark symphony. The words pulled at his mind, beckoning to him as if they held no danger at all. But he fought against their call, struggling to maintain clarity. Lily. Desperation fueled him as he saw her being dragged further into the darkness, illuminating a slim chance of escape. Jake dashed, feeling cold fingers scrape across his back. He could almost hear the forest laughing at his feeble attempts, a wicked revelry in their movements. "Keep fighting!" he roared, his voice breaking through the chaos. Suddenly, the figures parted just enough for him to break through. He reached Lily, just inches away, but a thick shadow, personified now, rushed toward him, blocking his path. The creature's eyes glimmered with a malevolent satisfaction, and it leaned down, whispering secrets only he could hear. "Turn back, Jake. All you seek is an end to your suffering. Join us." Its voice was honeyed, draping temptation like a cloak over his senses. With renewed determination, he grasped one of Lily's hands, feeling the pulse of her fear echo in his own. "We'll find Mom together. We will escape." He pulled hard, and they fell backward, tumbling into the heaviness of the forest floor. The fire's glow flickered like a dying ember, casting eerie shadows over their forms, but the tide surged forward, figures whispering promises of eternal rest, enticing him with visions of freedom. The forest's heart throbbed around them, an unrelenting force. Jake could feel the pull, an insidious threat wrapping around every fiber of his being, seducing him to surrender. "Jake, I can't hold on." Lily's voice faltered, and he felt her grip slackening. "Stay with me." Panic ripped through him, flooding his heart. The shadows inched closer, and just as the darkness threatened to consume them, a screech shattered the air, piercing through the sinister chant. An unseen force burst through the thick embers of the fire, sending the dark figures skittering backward. What was that? Jake gasped, scanning the area, but the flickering shadows suddenly paused, recoiling against something unseen, a presence that surged forth, light piercing through the oppressive gloom. Before Jake could register the moment, an enormous shadow cast over them, looming like a storm cloud above him. The figures began to whisper frantically, their movements growing frantic, as if the light threatened to unravel their grasp. "What's?" Jake started, but then he felt it. The pull had reversed, dragging him deeper into the abyss anew. "Lily!" he screamed as they were swept away from the light, pulled back into chaos, their worlds colliding in an unseen storm. In the haze, questions battered against the walls of his mind. Where was the light getting them? Was it a savior or a new horror waiting to be unleashed? And then, through the whirlwind, a thought flickered: was this always meant to be their fate? As they disappeared into the spiraling darkness yet again, a new voice sliced through the air, shattering the whispers into silence. It wasn't familiar, it wasn't friendly. "Welcome home, Jake. Your journey has just begun." Now bound to the shadows, what lay ahead remained a terrifying void, and the question nagged painfully: was there any escape left for them at all? Jake couldn't breathe. The shadows consumed him, an oppressive weight that clung to him like a shroud. He felt Lily's presence slipping away, her warmth fading into the icy grasp of the figures surrounding them. The harsh whispers echoed in his skull, relentless. "Welcome home, Jake. Your journey has just begun." The voice taunted, the cruel cadence winding around his thoughts, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. "No. You're lying." He shouted back into the enveloping darkness, desperation lacing his voice. Yet, his protest felt hollow, an echo of defiance against a tide of despair. Lily's face flashed in his mind, her terrified eyes searching his with an urgency he feared he might never see again. Forcing his fear down, he pulled at the tendrils of the shadows wrapped around him, pushing against their suffocating hold. "Lily! Hold on!" he cried, his words stumbling over guttural breaths. A thick, clammy fog wrapped around him, stinging his skin, and in that oppressive gloom, he noticed something cold and metallic pressing against his palm. A key? No, wait. It was his mother's old locket, shining faintly, breaking through the night like a forgotten star. With a shaky breath, Jake pressed it against his chest. "Get away from us!" he yelled, a fierce fire igniting within him. The shadows recoiled, hissing in displeasure, and for a moment, he felt a shift. Was the locket a beacon? A fragile light shining against their lurking terror, the dark figures writhed like worms in the dirt, inching closer again, but their movements were hesitant, fearful of the light seeping from the locket. "You cannot escape your fate," they chanted, the chilling sound vibrating in his bones. "Shut up!" A sudden surge of anger shot through him. He yanked Lily closer, feeling her tremble against him. "We've fought too hard to give in now. I want to let you take her." The echo of his voice seemed to reach another place entirely. A crack opened in the void, revealing swirling tendrils of light in the distance. It pulsated, drawing him in with an almost magnetic pull. Jake Lily's voice was a whisper barely riding above the sinister cacophony. "Where are we?" He could only shake his head, clutching the locket tightly, willing it to guide them. "To freedom. We have to go toward the light." Just then, a chilling wind swept through the mass of figures, scattering them like autumn leaves. They screeched in frustration, their voices merging into a dissonant hum. The way before them grew clearer, brighter, and they began to move toward it, fueled by a new sense of hope. But not all shadows retreated, a colossal figure emerged, blocking their exit. Its hollow eyes glared down, a void hungry for despair. "You think you can run?" There's nowhere to hide from the truth. Jake felt panic surge, pounding in his chest. "We'll find a way," he shouted defiantly, but doubt gnawed at him like a beast, clawing at his resolve. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath their feet, and they faltered, glancing back as the horde began to reform, powerful and relentless. The figures no longer seemed like disjoined bodies twisted by shadows, they took shape, resembling faces he barely recognized. Friends, family, whispers of the past clawing their way back to haunt him. "Leave us alone." Lily's voice cracked, and the tears that streamed down her cheeks glistened like tiny daggers in the dark. Each heartbeat echoed with the seriousness of their plight. Shadows gathered, ready to strike. But in that terrifying moment, Jake felt the locket pulse against him again, as if aware of the energy rippling through the air. With a roar born out of sheer determination, he surged forward, but knew he needed a plan, something to break the hold of the shadows once and for all. And then, just as he felt his strength waning, a chilling sound cut through the expectant silence, reverberating through the ground beneath them, a soft, rhythmic thrum, like the beating of a drum. "What is that?" he murmured, dread filling his gut. Lily's eyes widened, the shadows shifted as if sensing the growing power of the sound. "It's calling to them." Jake's heart raced. Who or what was calling? Would it lead to freedom or trap them further? As the shadows lunged forward in a frenzy, he grasped Lily's hand tighter, feeling the urgent need to decide. Could he trust this new sound, or would it lead them deeper into horror? And as they were swept into the chaos once more, a singular thought blasted through his mind: whatever it is, it's coming for us. Jake's heart raced as he and Lily stumbled through the forest, shadows cascading around them like a suffocating shroud. The echoing rhythm of that eerie drumbeat pulsed through the air, resonating in Jake's chest, igniting a flicker of hope. Yet the shadows loomed, flickering wraiths of despair, determined to claim them as their own. "Stay close, Lily," He barked as he tugged her along, fear gripping him tightly. The darkness seemed to pulse in response. The drumbeat grew louder, its tempo quickening, as if urging them to push forward, to escape the dark specters clawing at their heels. "I don't like this, Jake." Her voice trembled, the words hanging in the thick air like a specter itself. "What if it's a trick? Trust me." He squeezed her hand tighter, pushing through the underbrush, branches tearing at their clothes like hands trying to drag them back. "We have to keep moving." They burst into another clearing, the moonlight illuminating the scene before them. An old stone altar stood at its center, streaked with age and writhed in shadows. The drumbeat merged seamlessly with the pulsing of the earth beneath them, each thud vibrating through Jake's bones. On the altar lay scattered remnants of offering sacrifices from the lost souls who once stumbled here. Around them, the shadows formed undulating figures, swaying in tune with the heartbeat of the forest itself. Jake Lily's voice barely broke through the cacophony. He looked back, and dread snaked through him as he saw their faces, twisted with sorrow and despair. Friends and family he remembered tore at his heart, shadows of the past he always feared would resurface. "Stay away from them!" he shouted, forcing his body to move forward, pushing against the heavy currents of tearing grief. But their whispers seeped into his thoughts, promises of comfort and understanding that curled around his resolve. "Jake!" Lily's voice wavered, overtaken by the seductive refrain of the shadows. "Help them know!" he shouted back, the urgency of the moment surging through his veins. "We can't help them. They're trapped here, just like us." With a fierce determination, he turned and faced the pulsating altar, feeling the strength of the drum vibrating through his body. If they were going to escape, they needed to break the hold of the darkness. He raised the locket, the only piece of light he had left, a beacon of hope. "We want to become like you." The shadows recoiled, hissing and writhing as the light grew, expanding from the locket's core. They hissed, a chorus of dread and fury, their grip on reality beginning to wane. "Come on, Lily. We have to do this together." He stepped forward, the locket beam cutting through the darkness like dawn slicing through night. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked, terror lacing every syllable. "It will." He believed it fiercely, summoning every ounce of strength. "Just hold on to me." With a shaky breath, Lily stepped closer, grasping the locket as they faced the gathering shadows, the figures writhing and twisting in anger. "No!" they screamed, voices merging into a banshee-like wail. "You belong to us. We belong to each other." Jake shouted, defiance surging within him. He thrust the locket forward, illuminating the clearing with a brilliant light as the echoes of the drumbeat crescendoed into a thunderous roar. And as the shadows lunged, the locket pulsed, ripping through the darkness, dispersing it into shimmering mist. Together, they shouted in unison, voices mingling with the power they summoned, the love binding them together stronger than fear. The shadows fragmented before them, ghostly figures of friends and family who had succumbed to despair flickering like dying embers. But as they reached out, the warmth of the light engulfed them, the faded remnants dissolving into radiant streams of silver, finally freed as the raw power poured through them. Feeling invigorated, Jake pulled Lily close. "We're almost there," he shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. In that moment, the darkness shrieked in agony, attempting to reclaim what it had lost. But they pushed forward. Hearts thrumming with life, a charged rhythm against the deathly silence. They broke free, bursting into another clearing. The air was crisp, fresh, and rich with life. "Where are we?" Lily breathed, wide-eyed. They were free, no shadows followed them. "I think," Jake said, his voice shaky yet hopeful, "we made it." Before them lay the village, bathed in the golden light of dawn, the cobbled streets bathed in a warmth that felt almost tangible. They stumbled toward it, as the weight of fear slipped from their shoulders. "Mom!" Jake yelled into the dawn, hope bursting like fireworks. "Mom!" And out of the sunlight, a figure emerged. It was Sarah, her face worn but aglow, as if she had found her own way back from the abyss. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she ran towards them, arms outstretched, oblivious to the muted whispers of the forest fading into obscurity behind her. "Jake! Lily!" she cried, pulling them into a fierce embrace. "You're safe. You're here." As they wrapped themselves in that warmth, Jake felt the oppressive weight of the night lift completely, replaced by the bliss of reunion. Once united, they took a breath, weaving strength into their bond. They had faced the horrors of the dark and emerged into day together, but deep within the forest, the remnants of darkness lingered, whispering promises of return, a reminder of battles still ahead. But today, they had won.as they walked away from the shadows, hand in hand, tears of joy mingled into laughter. A grip that could not falter. And in that instance, Jake knew they would never have to fight the darkness alone ever again. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.